There are many influential anime out there. Popular anime, old school anime, this. This series is in the same museum as the Mona Lisa, by the way. But all these anime cripple under an influence of one anime. One anime that managed to shock, disturb, and impact the entire globe, becoming one of the most iconic films of all time. An anime called AKIRA. Before AKIRA, there wasn't much. There are a couple anime that are still well loved to this day, but most of it were long series made for f***ing babies. Ugh. That was of course until AKIRA made headlines all over the world as, ooh, not for babies, showing Western audiences more mature animation they just weren't getting at the time. And I mean mature. The film is extremely graphic, displaying body horror in a way that even to this day remains intensely horrifying, with it also being crafted excellently in a way that just wasn't seen at the time. Yet it's far from a perfect anime. This video delves into these topics, so if you're triggered by any of these or just dislike how I've made the video, just put on your big boy or girl pants and shut the f*** up. I want more money. 16th of the 7th, 1988, Tokyo. In the midst of the city, regular people were just living out their lives until a giant explosion erupts, consuming everything around it, starting World War III. You'll quickly notice the similarities between the story and the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with both bombings having devastating effects, with AKIRA exploring how these events could affect the community of that area. 31 years later, Tokyo has been built up and reconstructed, now called Neo-Tokyo. Despite that, the city's still in critical condition. It's civilians sick and tired of being f***ed around by the big guys in the government. In the middle of this madness lies a bar where we find one of our main characters, Kaneda, the leader of a gang called the Capsules, and quite a goofy fella. By the way, they're called the Capsules because that's what they like taking, Cappy's lad, as seen in the manga. He's interrupted when another Capsule member, Yamagata, informs him that their rival gang, the Clowns, have gathered around somewhere called Route 5. Just outside, we meet another MC, Tetsuo, as he fondles around in awe at Kaneda's customized by, with Kaneda teasing him saying it's too wild for him, sparking the older, younger brother dynamic we'll see throughout the entire film. The three then take off, chasing after the clowns and showcasing the film's incredible animation and attention to detail. Like, the whole cityscape just looks incredible throughout the entire film. Just remember that this was made in 1988. From the lights on their bikes to the atmosphere, this was all very unique at the time. Not to mention the incredible soundtrack that complements each scene perfectly. Eventually, we meet a long stretch of road where Kaneda takes on a clown member, beating him and sparking that iconic slide seen in so much shit, from Adventure Time to Clarence and even fucking Rocket League. Before they can go any further, however, cops begin to draw close as Tetsuo, Yamagata, and Kaneda continue their chase. Simultaneously, we switch to a man stumbling down a street with what seems to be a young boy as a news reporter details the violent protests currently proceeding due to the poor economic conditions in Neo-Tokyo. As the man defends the boy from police dogs and drags him through the thick of it. You guys like that?
He's trippy, right?
Eventually, he's stopped by a riot control unit as bystanders look on in confusion, including a woman named Kei and a man named Ryu, with the man eventually being gunned down, telling the boy to run to Ryu. Ooh, what does this mean? Seeing the man being shot once again, the boy screams, strangely causing buildings around him to crumble and decay. As onlookers scramble, both Kei and Ryu witness the boy vanishing into thin air, as we switch to another young boy and a man discussing the other child's whereabouts. Oh yeah, what the f*** just happened? I know all that sounded like schizophrenic rambling, but really, what is Ryu and Kei's connection to the boy? And why do both the children look so old?
It's the boss baby, bruh!
For now, we'll switch back to the Capsules, as the clowns force him into a halt, only for Tetsuo to continue the chase alone. And as scenes of the riots, chaos ensue, Tetsuo finally bludgeons the remaining clown member, only to run into the same boy from before. With Tetsuo twitching on the ground and the boy looking on in fear, Capsules arrive. And I just love the scene that follows. No annoying, shocked anime sound effects or anything. Everything from its movements to its expressions detail just how concerned Kaneda really is. And this level of detail is continued for the entire film. Spotting the boy, Kaneda yells out to him, only to be taken aback by a strange appearance with a military unit soon surrounding them. As the boy attempts to flee, he's only stopped by the other child, explaining how they
can't survive on the outside,
convincing him to
go home.
Why this kid has his evil throne-looking seat is a question I ask the entire film. Forced onto their stomachs, they witness Tetsuo being dragged away, as the man from before approaches the boy almost like a parent-child confrontation, like we've been been caught looking at images of boobs. Some while later, after being interrogated, we learn of the army's plan to hunt down anti-government groups, as Kaneda spots a girl he fancies in the same room, this being Kei. As the capsules are given freedom to leave, unfortunately with no information about Tetsuo's whereabouts, Kaneda manages to convince the officer to bring Kei with him. Yet despite his advances, Kei ultimately leaves after spotting a person in line to be interrogated, hinting at a possible partnership the two have. And no, it's not Ryu, but we'll get into that later. This is also where Kaneda's relation to Kei begins. Not because she might know something about Tetsuo and his whereabouts, of course not, but because he's trying to rizz that gat up so he can spit on that thing.
Hot two.
Switching perspectives, we see the same man from before, Shikishima, aka the Colonel, speaking to a government official about there being a mole on the executive council, as well as his poor management of the boy's escape. With that, we see both the Colonel and a doctor observing Tetsuo, with something called a special pattern emerging from him, as they discuss how they've
never seen a developmental speed or configuration like this,
and how
it may have begun with a shock of contact with number 26.
What it means is currently unknown to us, but we at least know it's something important, as they compare Tetsuo to another's monstrous pattern, this being AKIRA's. This is the first of many mentions of this AKIRA, a being so powerful that even a colonel fears being unable to control it, and even Tetsuo's potential to wield such power. As the word AKIRA rings out within Tetsuo, we switch to the gang's school. The school is honestly better called a prison, as we come to realize the wasteland the education system has come to be, showing how the city's deterioration has reached every crevice there is. After being literally punched in their faces by their teacher, the gang leave, meeting up with a group of girls, one of them being Kaori, someone who's particularly worried about Tetsuo, hinting at a possible relationship the two have, with Kaneda also sharing those same worrisome feelings. Again, just look how fluid this scene is. There's so much going on that shows the characters' personalities, yet it's crafted in a way so that nothing looks messy. It's just great. Coming to learn of Tetsuo's escape from hospital, we then see Kaori finishing up her laundry as an exhausted Tetsuo greets her at the entrance. Speaking outside, Tetsuo explains how it was like the doctors were examining him, messing around with the inside of his head, as he asks Kaori to run away with him.
Someplace far away.
The next day, whilst hanging around at school, the gang look outside to see Tetsuo stealing Kaneda's bike with Kaori on the back, likely out of an act of defiance towards Kaneda. Unfortunately for the pair, they ride right past the hideout of the clowns. The two continue their joyride until the bike comes to a halt due to Tetsuo's negligence on how advanced the bike actually is. But looking back, the pair see a group of bikes coming towards them, yet it's already too late. Whilst the gang search for the two, we see the clowns holding Tetsuo down before sexually assaulting Kaori, and I don't really fuck with it. Now, I'm not saying you can't have intense topics such as rape or assault in an anime, but only when it's necessary for the plot. Here, it's not really needed, as there's more ways to tell that the clowns despise the capsules. The rape attempt here was just kind of lazy storytelling in a film that's mostly brilliant. As one of the clowns goes to light Kaneda's bike ablaze, the gang arrive just in time, showcasing an incredible attack sequence on Kaneda's part. Like, that shit just looked fucking epic. As time passes, we see Tetsuo brutally bashing one of the clown members, only to be stopped by Kaneda. Yet his annoyance towards Tetsuo only escalates the situation further. Tetsuo then exclaims,
"Why do you always have to try to save me? I could handle it on my own. I won't always be on the receiving end."
This inferiority complex he suffers from finally coming to light as he begins to stumble away. Yet he doesn't make it far, as once again the word AKIRA rings out through his head, with visions flashing in and out of his mind. Visions of horrific events that this AKIRA figure forces him to bear witness to. And yes, it's the meme, fuck up.
Leave me alone! AKIRA!
Stumbling to his knees, a vision of the ground beneath him crumbling shows. Yet as he falls through, his insides instead spill onto the ground, as he desperately tries to recover them in his madness. This scene was just incredible. That grotesque imagery of his guts splattered, his terrified look of shock, and even how he tries to gather his organs makes it feel like he's really suffered that trauma and it's not just a vision. As his pain continues, the others gather round in confusion. Yet once again, before they're able to help him, the military intervenes, injecting Tetsuo with a strange liquid and blocking the others out, as they proceed to take him away once again. Unable to save him, Kaneda leans upon a bridge as an explosion occurs, with Kaneda noticing Ryu, and more importantly, importantly, Kei sprinting out. With Yamagata and fellow capsule member Kai ready to leave, they turn to see Kaneda gone. Changing to Kei, we see her split off with Ryu and go separate ways, only for her to be stopped by a group of armed men. Yet that doesn't matter as Kaneda comes charging down, tackling one of the men, but in retaliation causing Kei to shoot, killing one of the men. Now in shock because she obviously has never shot a man,
What the fuck?
Kei and Kaneda quickly leave as we switch to Tetsuo, now having visions of his childhood, as we relive his surrender to an orphanage with both himself and Kaneda bonding together as children. But something just feels off as Tetsuo turns to see everything crumbling beneath his very eyes, including himself. Waking up, his migraines return, only for the windows around him to shudder as he screams in agony. With that, we switch to the doctor and the colonel, speaking to another just strange, almost sickly looking child, her name being Kyoko. She explains how she had a dream in which the city was covered by a dark shadow and began to crumble, with many people dying and Akira appearing once again, as she mentions Tetsuo's name in the midst of this. This dream seems to actually foreshadow a possible future, to the point where even the colonel becomes frightened. I think it's about time I explained who these kids are. Kyoko, Takeshi, and Masaru, number 25, 26, and 27 respectively, are better known as the Espers, a trio of government test subjects with a range of psychic powers, all three of them having some form of connection to this AKIRA figure, which begs for questions. How old are these children actually, and what is their connection to this AKIRA? In order to understand more of Kyoko's prediction, both the Colonel and the Doctor travel deep underground, where the Doctor speaks of a young researcher's inquiry, stating,
He wondered if their power was the form the next stage of human evolution was taking, and perhaps we would all be able to control it someday.
just keep this in mind. You're not going to, are you? Finally arriving, they opened a giant safe door as the Colonel is greeted with a freezing room with a towering connection of tubes and wires, all leading to a door that says AKIRA. The Colonel stating previous researchers were in the midst of
Shutting the lid of the Pandora's box they themselves had opened.
Making a return to Kaneda and Kei, we see Kei searching relentlessly for Ryu, as Kaneda just goes on some schizoid ramble trying to woo over Kei, which is like, your best mate is just a little fucked up at the moment, maybe the puss can wait a bit. But it's already been established that he's a bit of a dope, so whatever. Interrupting Kaneda, the pair are found by Ryu and some others. And by the way, don't these two just look similar? I mean, it's the same with Kaneda and Kei, they look like siblings. It's a little bit weird. After they lock Kaneda away in a room, we come to realize exactly who Kei and Ryu are. The Resistance, an anti-government terrorist group both Kei and Ryu reside in. Their mission? Find Akira. They're also the ones responsible for Takeshi's attempted escape, but we all know how that went. And here they've gathered with a new mission straight from their leader. Sneak into the military's lab and obtain detailed data on the new subject. But before more can be said, they find Kaneda sneaking around. Pleading for them not to shoot him, he exclaims how the new subject they're after is a friend of his, being Tetsuo. Afterwards, we meet Ryu speaking to a man about utilizing Kaneda in their plan, as he knows Tetsuo, with the man then monologuing his desire to see Neo Tokyo change. Continuing, he explains how its citizens will actually be the ones to change it, as the two witness a group worshipping Akira as some kind of deity. Looks like they won't be going to heaven. Panning down, we see the entire executive council bumping heads over various issues occurring in Neo Tokyo, all of which seem to connect the economy of the city to the Colonel's needs for the Espers, but of which have been draining the political and economic state of the city. With outrage sparking among the council due to the Colonel's request for even more funding due to Kyoko's prediction, each member becomes frustrated with their own claims, as we see a familiar face keeping quiet during this. Mr. Nezu, a minister on the Executive Council and the leader of the Resistance. He's also the moral mention towards the start of the film. It's clear now that he's not in favour of the Colonel's doings, and so in retaliation has led this anti-government group. The arguments soon turn towards Akira, with members stating that there's no proof that the previous war was actually caused by him, continuing as they blame the Colonel for leaked info regarding Akira, causing the citizens to form these anti-government groups. The dispute ends as the PM states,
Colonel, we can no longer leave the peace of Neo Tokyo to your sole discretion.
with the Colonel storming off in a fit of frustration, but not before letting out a couple grunts and growls. We switch to a city engulfed in a dangerous red hue as we hone in on Tetsuo, still in pain with its powers slowly progressing, and simultaneously we notice Kaneda and the rest of the resistance successfully sneaking into the building Tetsuo resides in. As his intense migraines persist, he hallucinates a teddy bear, a bunny, and a car gathering towards him, only to vanish quickly. But not before returning, larger and more terrifying than before, leaking milk for some reason.
I love milk.
As he stumbles back, Tetsuo trips on some glass, cutting open his foot whilst breaking the windows in the room. As the blood frightens the toys, it's revealed that the espers were actually the ones behind this attack, leaving Tetsuo bewildered and frustrated. The fuck was all that about? What's up with the milk? Well, something that you need to remember is that the espers are children still mentally, and have stayed children for some time due to the drugs they were forced to take, which is why they use milk instead of blood, because it still scares them. But that doesn't explain why they attacked Tetsuo. Shh. All will be explained soon, baby girl. Soon, the doctors notice that something's not right, and sure enough, they find Tetsuo broken out of his room. But as they try to coerce him into another room, Tetsuo, now fully aware of his powers, stumbles away as we switch to the resistance sneaking underground, only to be stopped by armed forces. As more reinforcements arrive and immediately spot K, Kaneda leaps onto one of the vehicles and takes him down, afterwards stealing it and escaping with K, traversing through a labyrinth of metal pipes and whatnot. The whole landscape here just looks amazing. It just gives off this wondrous yet surreal vibe. As they come to learn of Tetsuo's critical condition and journey to the baby room, we see Tetsuo now being targeted and attacked by armed guards, yet now awakened to his psychic powers, he attacks, killing them all with ease. As he arrives in the baby room, both Takashi and Masaru emerge from the walls, only to be swiftly taken down by Tetsuo. Directly after, they return a blow and escape, as Tetsuo remains bewildered by his powers. During this, we see Kaneda and Kei still traversing through the underground, yet it seems as if Kyoko is using Kei to give Kaneda direction, as she slowly comes into frame. How she's able to do this will be explained later. I know, just like, oh, first world problems, you have to wait, shut the fuck up. As Takashi and Masaru come knocking on Kyoko's enclosure, Tetsuo soon follows, realizing that Takashi was actually the one he made contact with that fateful day. As Takashi and Masaru proceed to attack Tetsuo, he's able to counter them with even more power, as the place begins to crumble, with the Colonel and Doctor appearing, trying to calm him in the midst of his migraines. This is where the espers warn Tetsuo, saying,
"Be people like you should never use the power like that. Something horrible will happen."
Soon after mentioning a being even more powerful than himself, AKIRA. Continuing, they collectively say that he'll awaken AKIRA, and
If that happens, no one will be able to stop him. So before that can happen, we have to stop you.
This explaining why the espers attacked him in the first place, in order to prevent devastation from occurring. Despite their best efforts, Tetsuo continues to rampage, destroying every inch of the baby room until Kaneda and Kei come flying through. Kaneda, now relieved to see Tetsuo, expresses his desire to rescue him, but before he can continue, they're swarmed with armed forces. Triggering Tetsuo, he attacks him, forcing Kaneda back in the process. Yet that doesn't seem to bother him. Now drunk with power, Tetsuo states,
I won't be needing you to come to the rescue ever again.
snidely remarking that he'll be saving Kaneda from now on. It's clear now that Tetsuo has gone mad from power, flicking Kaneda up in the air whilst laughing maniacally about it. His inferiority complex mixed with his insanity has caused Tetsuo to become a completely different person. The weight of never being as good as Kaneda finally caving in and reversing, resulting in their relationship falling apart. At first, I was like, damn, what a fucking bitch! But after knowing the horrors he's been subjected to, along with feeling inferior to Kaneda almost all his life, it makes sense that he'd just go completely insane. As Kyoko tries to get Tetsuo to stop, he's able to read her mind, finding Akira's location in the process, that being underneath the Olympic Stadium. Drunk with power, Tetsuo flies off into the distance as everyone gathers himself within the rubble. The Colonel pissed at Kei and Kaneda until the espers reveal Tetsuo's plan, prompting him to leave, with Kei locking eyes with Kyoko, infatuated with her. As the Colonel leaves ready to track down Tetsuo, he's met with a man reading him a notice from the Executive Council.
At 2400 hours today, the colonel is hereby stripped of his command and rank, and will be placed under arrest.
This prompts the colonel to open fire against the man, stating for everyone to open their eyes and look at the big picture, not wanting to give in to the council's so-called corruption. His militaristic ideals sparking him to announce a state of emergency to arrest all members of the council. Switching to Tetsuo, we see him stumbling into the bar they frequent at, asking the bartender for some capsules. These aren't the same drugs administered to him by the colonel, they're just the caps the gang like taking to get high. It's just not touched on that much in the anime, leaving plenty of people confused, which again, another thing we'll talk about later. The bartender obliges, saying how much harder they are to get with all the riots occurring, making them more expensive. Just make your own! It can't be that hard. Later on, we see Yamagata and Kai enter the bar, only to be met with a gruesome sight. As the bartender's body lays lifeless, the pair witness a now high Tetsuo sitting atop them, laughing maniacally again, holding a bag of capsules. Questioning if he's even Tetsuo, the pair realize what he's done to the barkeep, evoking Yamagata to confront Tetsuo, only to be knocked back down by him, with Tetsuo's malicious gaze infecting the entire screen. Damn, that double chin's pretty gnarly, man. Sometime later, we see that both Kaneda and Kei have been imprisoned, with Kaneda questioning what this AKIRA figure everyone keeps mentioning actually is. Kei then begins to monologue, saying how AKIRA is absolute energy, explaining how humans have so much knowledge and energy inside of them, as she connects the genes of evolution from humans to monkeys all the way down to plankton and amoeba, and then to water, air, and even space dust, mentioning the memories hidden within all of that and maybe even the beginning of the universe. Continuing, she questions if everyone has those memories through the genes we share, and what would happen if the evolutionary timeline accidentally gave an amoeba a human's energy and power. She explains how the government tried to harness and control this power once, only for it to trigger the fall of Tokyo, and as Kyoko is revealed to be controlling Kei, the door unlocks, cutting off the remaining sentence. Here, I believe absolute energy is a combination of the energy and memories of everything that is and was, from the energy of a monkey to the energy of the Big Bang, all connected through the genes we share. AKIRA's power, and potentially Tetsuo's, is exactly that. The energy of all that is and was. Everything. Best represented by giving an amoeba a human's energy, it would just consume everything. Which is exactly what happened, causing Tokyo to be engulfed by that gigantic explosion brought upon by AKIRA. Now, is that all correct? I don't really know, but I feel like a fucking genius either way. After fleeing their cell and witnessing Kaneda's attempt at a normal conversation, we hear the Espers planning to utilize Kei for something, as we switch over to the city, now overrun by tanks, choppers, and armed forces. In the midst of this lies Kai in some rubble, hiding out when he sees Kaneda and Kei fleeing. The next day, Kai reveals the death of Yamagata at the hands of Tetsuo to Kaneda, claiming that
it was like he was a different person,
before he begins to break down. This is where Kaneda starts to express his feelings for Tetsuo, saying that he was a klutz in their orphanage and that everybody made him cry. He is then awkwardly cut off by Kai after a few seconds of nothing, which is odd. There was no acknowledgement of what Kaneda said, nor did he need to say it when he did. It was like he was put on mute by everyone for a few seconds. Afterwards, we see Kai bring Kaneda Yamagata's bike, only for him to ram it directly into a wall, calling him a dumb bastard as it explodes. This was probably Kaneda's way of sending Yamagata to the afterlife, I assume at least. Maybe he just fucking hated the bike or some shit. Returning to the river, Kaneda and Kai see Kei being taken away by the Espers. Yet as Kaneda testifies against this and blames them for Tetsuo's actions, Kyoko states,
AKIRA's power exists within everyone. You must choose how to use it, and he has made his choice. We're partly to blame for his actions.
As she leaves the conversation by stating they need Kei to help them, but why? Also, I just love how expressive Kaneda is here. You can really tell he's furious with their explanation, which the Japanese voice actor does a great job of in my opinion. I don't know about the English dub. Changing views, we see Mr. Nezu in shock as he realizes the colonel's plan to arrest him and the other executive members, and as he stuffs as much money as possible in his suitcase, Ryu appears mortally wounded from before, stating that
the mission was a failure.
Convinced that Ryu sold him out, Mr. Nezu fires at him. We then switch to a street in which civilians watch in terror as a helicopter goes down, only for Tetsuo to emerge within the flames, and as he wraps a red blanket around him, presumably to feel like a sick cunt, we come to realize the true scale of that big fucking forehead. God damn! With all attempts to gun him down futile, the remaining civilians become infatuated with him, convinced that Tetsuo is actually the one they've been worshipping, AKIRA, but he's not.
Which one of you is Goku?
We then see Mr. Netsu, exhausted and on the brink of collapse, with a near-dead Ryu trailing closely. And as his suitcase opens, Ryu continues along his path, as Netsu suffers a heart attack and dies on the spot, presumably from the extreme stress he had to endure in such a short amount of time. But even so, the dude's like 54, like, come on, man. As Ryu makes his way to the street, we see dozens of citizens gathering to see their supposed Akira before he too succumbs to his injuries. In the midst of this, Kaori watches a broadcast documenting the carnage occurring, shocked to find Tetsuo as their attacker, and as the report is shut down, she follows the crowd to Tetsuo's supposed location. With that, we see Kaneda hop on his bike, speeding off to face Tetsuo, leaving Kai behind by himself, as we then switch to Tetsuo, now being followed by more Akira followers, boosting his ego even more. As armed forces shoot lasers at him, missing and hitting some of the Akira followers, Tetsuo retaliates by completely destroying the bridge both the army and the civilians were on, showcasing even more of his destructive power. As the colonel is notified that Tetsuo is actually in the vicinity of Kira's location, we see it's already too late as Tetsuo menacingly makes his way towards the stadium. During this, we see the doctor checking up on Tetsuo's special pattern from before, only to see that it's morphed into something even more complex and fascinating than before, which we can compare to the strengthening of his power from the start to now. We see this power even more as Tetsuo demolishes the path behind him on his way to meet Akira, still suffering from his intense migraines. As he enters Akira's imprisoned room, Kei emerges from above the rubble, confronting Tetsuo, saying, "You shouldn't use your power this way. In the end, you won't be able to control it." But just as it's revealed that the Espers are controlling Kei, they initiate their attack on Tetsuo. Driving through the carnage, Kaneda picks up a laser weapon from a dead guard, as civilians and the colonel gather around to see Akira's chamber rising up from beneath the surface. As witnesses look on in a nightmare blunt rotation of shock, terror, and amazement, the Espers and Tetsuo continue their battle. Yet all seems futile as Tetsuo's powers continue to grow stronger and stronger, even to the point of levitating the enclosure, as Kei's body emerges from the smoke, hammering into the rubble as the giant dome begins to fall apart. As the smoke clears, we see Kei's body luckily protected by the Espers, with Tetsuo finally coming face to face with the cause of his pain, Akira. Opening it up, Tetsuo finds not a body but tubes. This is Akira, or at least what's left of him, as the colonel explains that his body was subjected to every test known to science, leaving only nerves and whatnot frozen for future generations to figure out Akira's power. As Tetsuo again attacks, the colonel initiates a plan to utilize something called Soul, with Kaneda and Kai going their separate ways in order to get to Tetsuo. And finally, whilst Tetsuo observes his newfound discovery, Kaneda, along with the laser gun, confront him amongst the debris. They both then begin insulting each other.
Would you rather have unlimited...
Kaneda calling him a little baby, as Tetsuo calls him a pain in the ass, saying how he's always treating him like a kid. This inferiority complex again showing itself. And then, they both initiate their attacks, the same menacing music from the first bike chase fading in. It's a great action sequence, as is most of the action in this film, displaying Tetsuo's ego-driven power and Kaneda's determination in a brilliant way. Despite distractions from Kei emerging from the ruins, Kaneda manages a direct hit to Tetsuo's stomach, only for it to be a dud. Frustrated with his power, Tetsuo remarks,
"Now do you understand how it feels being little and helpless?"
Yet is then thrown off as a giant blue beam shines down on him, obliterating everything in its path, as we see what soul actually meant. No, it's not an actual soul, but a dangerous weapon. Just when Kei comes to her senses and Kai arrives at the scene, we see Tetsuo emerge, screaming from pain after noticing his arm being amputated by the blast, whilst Kaneda prepares to drop a rock directly onto his head, until another beam comes charging down, only to be deflected by a barrier from Tetsuo, as he then flies off into the sky above. Something that's pretty neat about the film is the really gruesome animation coexisting with some pretty goofy shit. Just like after Tetsuo dips, Kaneda runs down the wreckage in a very comedic way, reminiscent of old Disney films, taking the edge off as it calms the scene down, which smoothly leads into a new atmosphere in the following moments. Glowing a bright red, Tetsuo reaches for a weapon touching the toes of space, as he then destroys it, causing multiple beams to plummet down to Earth, destroying everything it encounters. In the midst of this, we see Kai and Kei attempt to rescue Kaneda from certain death, only to be engulfed by the beam themselves. But despite losing all hope, the beam slowly fades away as we see Soul crumbling into the atmosphere, with the Colonel looking on as it makes contact with the ground. Tetsuo's power is now reaching places thought to be impossible, with the Doctor entranced by his special pattern, whilst Tetsuo forms a new arm made from scrap metal. The turbo wank he could have would be immaculate, my god. Looking into the sky, the Espers begin a spiel, with Kyoko stating,
"The future doesn't proceed along a single course. There ought to be a future we can choose."
acknowledging her rebellion towards her earlier prediction. Later that night, we see the Colonel meet with the Doctor, amazed by the results Tetsuo's power is showing, saying how they might even be able to unlock the truths of the universe. But the Colonel just don't give a fuck. Stumbling in the back, the Colonel says just how out of control Tetsuo's pattern has become, and with stopping Tetsuo from destroying the city being his main objective, he becomes enraged at the Doctor. Simultaneously, we see Kei, Kai, and Kaneda hiding out under some wreckage. You know, just having a laugh when Tetsuo's just essentially tried to kill them all. Like, I get it, Kaneda has a pretty carefree attitude the entire film, but come on, man. Now is not the time for that goober shit. Fading into the stadium, we see Kaori stumbling upon Akira's remains, finding Tetsuo in intense pain, with the Colonel now taking matters into his own hands. Sitting down, Tetsuo begins to twitch, as we see his new arm begin to grow uncontrollably, with the Colonel confronting him as Tetsuo demands medicine. It's clear now that the drugs he was on, both from the military and the barkeep, have worn off, resulting in his power suddenly growing out of control, leaving him in intense pain. Despite the Colonel's best efforts to contain him, Tetsuo remains enraged, sending him flying back, but then shooting him in retaliation. But as he gets up, something disturbing happens. Growing into a disgusting mass of flesh and wires, Tetsuo attacks the Colonel, only for Kaneda to return, shooting at him and causing another fight to break out. Again, it's another phenomenal action sequence, showcasing even more of Tetsuo's destructive power and behavior, whilst we witness Kaneda's resolve to stop Tetsuo, now even stronger than before. But the scene stopped as the Espers arrive at the stadium, heading towards what's left of Akira. Kaneda, seeing Tetsuo distracted, aims and fires directly at Tetsuo, landing a direct hit. But as he stops to land another, he notices something strange about Tetsuo's movements, and now just let the rest of this scene play. This is the most horrific display of body horror I have ever seen in any medium. I was generally left speechless when Tetsuo started to morph into this hideous amalgamation of flesh and whatnot. The sound design here is also phenomenal. It just made me super uncomfortable. Now completely out of his control, Tetsuo's powers begin to consume everything in its path, including Kaori and Kaneda. At the same time, the Espers begin almost praying to Akira, unable to do anything themselves to stop Tetsuo. Now fully aware of the monstrosity he has become, Tetsuo begs Kaneda for help, saying how his powers are acting on its own, crushing Kaori to death against his own will. Again, the Japanese voice actor for Tetsuo here does an excellent job of expressing how horrified Tetsuo is, as we witness him continuously grow and grow into just a mass of flesh, like he's no longer even human. In fact, it's almost as if he's regained his sanity, now telling Kaneda to run away, no longer wanting to do anyone any harm. Using the laser gun, Kaneda finally breaks free, only to be met with a monster. As it makes its way towards the Colonel, we see the Doctor bewildered by Tetsuo's pattern, not even resembling what it once was, but taking on a completely new form. As it begins to consume both the Colonel and the Espers, Takashi looks up, as Akira's tubes break open, revealing a form of light that proceeds to repel Tetsuo's powers away from it, as we finally come face to face with Akira. As the light begins to consume the stadium, we see the Doctor witnessing Akira's pattern emerge, as Kyoko teleports the Colonel away from the light, protecting him from certain death. The ball of light, now identical to the one from the start of the film, continues to disintegrate everything, seeing Tetsuo writhing in agony as he slowly morphs back to normal, screaming out to Kaneda for help with such extreme emotion. And despite Takashi's efforts to get him away, Kaneda almost willingly becomes consumed along with Tetsuo, and not wanting to see someone innocent die, Takashi runs in after him despite warning from both Kyoko and Masaru. But even so, the two become willingly sucked into the light, knowing that with the three of them, they could definitely save Kaneda from certain death. As Kai and Kei witness the light light obliterating everything, we see Kaneda floating around inside the light, only to be sucked in by a glowing ball, this being Tetsuo's own memories. Memories of the two joyfully riding together and Kaneda showing intrigue in Tetsuo as he arrived at the children's home years ago. But before he can see anymore, an even bigger ball of light consumes him, these being AKIRA's own memories. In them, we see Takeshi, Kyoko, and Masaru as actual normal children. All seems fine until a curious Masaru finds AKIRA lying on a bed as if he was being tested on, as we switch to the other three suffering a similar fate. Sometime later, in the memory, we see the four of them being observed as they learn to utilize their seemingly newfound psychic abilities, the memory ending with all of them smiling happily together. Kaneda, now aware of AKIRA's memories, is told by the Espers that they called AKIRA to take Tetsuo away, claiming that it's all too much for him, and for the Espers, and even for AKIRA, but their sentences are soon each cut off, saying,
"But someday we'll also be able to."
You see, it's already begun.
As he's left confused and dazed, Kaneda floats around the almost serene landscape of debris spiraling around, before landing and being once again drawn into Tetsuo's memories. They pick up where they left off, as we see a beaten up Tetsuo alone, before being greeted by a bruised Kaneda, returning a toy from some bullies he had fought, calling them wimps, as we see how these two best friends met in a beautiful display of each other's personalities. With the screen fading away, we're meted with Kaneda waking up after hearing Kei calling out to him, whilst we witness the true destructive power of AKIRA's psychic abilities, it being so powerful the Doctor even quotes it as the birth of a new universe, as everything in its path becomes sucked into it, including Kaneda once again. But as it stops expanding, it shrinks in an incredible amount of time, as buildings, wind, water, and even the Doctor, rest in peace, get sucked into it. When after a moment, nothing is left of it, creating an almost peaceful atmosphere among the chaos. In the midst of the aftermath, we see Kei yelling out to Kaneda, searching for him as we see Kaneda kneeling before the condensed ball of light, as he claps his hands around it gently, saying, Tetsuo, as it disappears into nothingness. With Kei now behind him, Kaneda gives his thanks for calling out to him, giving him some more hope among the despair, as he further explains how Tetsuo, the Espers, and AKIRA have all left, their conversation being cut short by Kai's relief, as beautiful beams of light shine through the clouds. And as the Colonel looks on into the landscape, we see Kai, Kei, and Kaneda ride off into the distance, with the Espers repeating, "But someday we'll also be able to. You see, it's already begun." What precedes is a complex array of light and darkness coming together at intense speeds, forming an incomprehensibly large explosion, the birth of a universe, as we hear Tetsuo's voice one last time. And that's the film completed. Well, there's a bunch of shit happening at the start of the ending credits, like galaxies and shit being formed, but that's not really important. Or is it? Oh, you're just gonna have to wait and see it! Now, after watching that experience of an acid trip, you may have a couple of questions. Just a couple of questions. Because despite being an excellently crafted film, it also has a lot of rough spots. Like, why do some of the characters look almost identical to each other? And why is it so damn confusing in some parts? Dealing with shit like absolute energy and death and rebirth and fucking shit. So with my PhD in intelligence, I'm going to explain what the fuck we just watched. Now, I have to clarify something. Despite what I just said, I'm not very intelligent. You can just see that by looking at me. This is just my own interpretation of the story, and seeing as people are debating certain topics within the film to this day, I could very well be wrong about my opinions. So if you have a different interpretation to mine, nice. And I have not read the manga. This is only about the film, although I will be drawing comparisons to the manga here and there. Rewinding back the clock, the first thing we need to look at are the events preceding the start of the film, this being the kids and how they obtained their psychic powers. Initially, the government recruited orphaned children for their project to bring out psychic abilities in mankind, likely to be used as war weapons. Among these children were Takeshi, Kyoko, Masaru, and of course, AKIRA. But compared to the others, there was just something different about AKIRA, as it seemed like his powers were stronger than the others, which soon turned out to be fatal. AKIRA's abilities soon surpassed anything the government were capable of containing, soon reaching a climax in 1988, which is when we see the giant explosion, or more like his ascension to a higher being, mistaken by the world and even the Japanese government as a nuclear detonation, which started World War III. Which is kind of weird, because the time the film is set in is 2019, 31 years after the end of World War III, and if you minus 31 from 2019, you get 1988. So did this war only last a year or something? I still personally think it makes more sense as a bomb that ended the war, but whatever. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, the parallels to this and the disasters of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are harrowing. Both were large explosions, both also killed thousands upon thousands of people, and both led entire cities to have to be rebuilt from the ground up. The film partially explores the aftermath of a devastating catastrophe like this one as one of its themes, which can be linked to the decay of Neo-Tokyo and its citizens' distrust for the government. Following Akira's extreme psychic awakening, the three remaining children, known as the Espers, presumably were kept hidden secret from the world and given drugs in order to cease their powers from growing uncontrollably like Akira's. Yet, through their captivity, the Colonel seems to have been a father figure for them, speaking to them like actual human beings and not just lab rats, with this appreciation being shown with Kyoko's attempt to save the Colonel from the blast at the end of the film. Which begs a new question: who's really the bad guy? As we see later on, each main character has good qualities and bad qualities in them, making them feel more human and leaving us ambiguous as to who the villain really is. And that's really cool. It's not like most anime where it's clear who the villain is because they're so over the top and annoying. Just like in ReZero Season 3. Fuck you, it's not that good. As the decades go by, it's clear that the economy of Neo-Tokyo has only worsened over time, with citizens rioting over each decision the government makes, which seems to have been in favor of military funding for seemingly decades, resulting in a worn-torn and broken down city. Again, this shows two sides to the Colonel. One, he needs for funding in order to keep the Espers secure, and the other being his hatred for what the city's become. This quickly forms multiple anti-government groups such as the Resistance, containing K, Ryu, and Mr. Nezu, a parliament member himself rebelling against the Colonel, but only for his own benefit really, as the moments before his death show how greedy he really was. As all this is going on, Kaneda and Tetsuo grow up within this chaos, both meeting in an orphanage and quickly becoming best friends. Their rebellion against authority continuing as they age into teenagers, forming their gang, the Capsules, as they take drugs, start brawls, and do some shady shit all to make money. This good and bad side can be seen in Kaneda as well, as he technically is the hero of the story and is a pretty good guy, but at the same time he also enjoys beating the shit out of people and can be a bit of a prick sometimes, especially to Tetsuo. This then sparks Tetsuo's inferiority complex, never being quite as good as Kaneda in certain fields as Kaneda continues to tease him. It's just like an older younger brother thing. It's the same with my brothers as well, except here it's affected Tetsuo deeply, only emerging when his powers awakened. Continuing on, we then see a member of the Resistance attempting to flee with Takashi, only to fail, with Takashi eventually fading away, meeting Tetsuo as he charges towards him. This one collision sparked Tetsuo's unawakened abilities to activate, as we then see his powers progressively become stronger and stronger as the government experiments on him. His abilities, and the Espers as well, are expressed scientifically through this special pattern. Basically, the larger and more complex it is, the more powerful that psychic is. Akira being so powerful, it just creates a dome over everything. But just as Tetsuo's powers grow, so do his intense migraines, with Akira being repeated as he has visions of the future with each flash of light, whilst also hallucinating extreme gore. He also dreams of himself and Kaneda as young kids playing, with the city and himself crumbling into nothing. I believe this to be an interpretation of the future, with both the city and Tetsuo crumbling, just like when Akira shows up with Kaneda watching on, unable to help Tetsuo from his torment. As the days go on, we see the Espers attempting to dispose of Tetsuo, fearing he may cause Akira to awaken. This has the opposite effect, however, causing Tetsuo to lose his sanity and rampage through the hospital, eventually meeting Kaneda in the baby room. With his newfound abilities and ego-driven issues now at a max, he taunts and attacks Kaneda, not being able to be bossed around anymore. Then, after finding out where Akira is, Tetsuo rampages through the city with the military hunting him down, fearing another Akira-sized disaster. It's in the midst of this where we see Kei being controlled by Kyoko in the prison cell, as she explains what exactly Akira's power is. I already explained it, but for my dementia-riddled viewers, it's basically just the combined energy and memories of everything in the universe that's connected through genes. resulting in Akira basically having the power of a god, which gave him the ability to ascend within that first explosion. Just like Tetsuo, I believe Kei had the potential to unlock these psychic abilities, this being how Kyoko can control her at will. It's also why when Tetsuo finally makes his way down to Akira's chamber, the Espers use Kei collectively to try and defeat Tetsuo, but we all know how that went. Skipping ahead, everything then bleeds into Tetsuo's horrific mutation, his power being so insanely strong that not even he can control them at will, resulting in the death of Kaori as the Espers pray for Akira to descend, now knowing that the only one who can stop Tetsuo is him. Something I think is a cool little detail is as Tetsuo mutates into this amalgamation of flesh, at some points he shares the same features as a baby, which may represent the birth of a new type of being. Akira eventually shows himself as a giant globe of light, soon consumes everything in its path, just like the first explosion. This is, of course, only part of Akira's power, something so powerful not even the Espers or Tetsuo can escape it, with Tetsuo soon morphing into this light due to his power, forming as his memories of himself in a beautiful sphere. At this level of power, that's all they can really become, transcendence of the physical body, just like Akira and his giant sphere of memories. The light expands, sucking everything possible into it like a black hole, as it then collapses on itself. The small ball of light, also containing Akira, the Espers, and Tetsuo, disappears as Kaneda grips his hands around it, vanishing into an entire new plane of existence, a new dimension. Akira's powers are so great that he's able to send everyone to unexisting planes, with the Espers saying that someday we'll also be able to. You see, it's already begun, implying that Akira has enabled them to truly harness their powers as gods. Here we see a new universe being born, a big bang if you will, with Tetsuo's voice being heard alongside the birth, saying, "I am Tetsuo," his soft voice implying that he has cast aside his aggression and insecurities. The film ends as we see this new universe being shaped by Tetsuo, his power reaching the ultimate peak and becoming transcendent of any realm, becoming a god. And that's the anime explained, mostly. Probably missed a couple things or got a couple things wrong. Hey, that's just my interpretation of this story. You make a very long video about it next, please. But there's still a lot more to Akira. Just like the themes presented throughout the film, such as the destructive potential of power in the wrong hands, seen in Tetsuo, the ideas surrounding death and rebirth, as seen in the 4 psychics awakenings at the end, the result of messing around with extreme power, and so much more. It's pretty amazing how much shit they were able to fit into the anime, but yet it still missed out on a lot that the manga showcases. Apparently. Again, I haven't read the manga yet. I'm on that Burke grind at the moment, baby. The film was written by the manga's author, Katsuhiro Otomo, with the movie only containing the first, second, parts of the third, and 6th volumes, as the manga was being written simultaneously, first being published in 1982 and concluding in 1990, 2 years after the film was first aired. Since the anime was created during the manga's serialization, there were certain things that popped up here and there that just didn't have time to be flushed out, such as drug addiction, corruption, evolution, existence, etc. These things all being expanded on in the manga and creating just a more cohesive story. And I can see that in the film. Like, why did Tetsuo take all the barkeep's drugs? It could have been to help ease his pain, but at that point he was still drugged up by the government. And it's a point in the manga that they all take drugs and certain characters have a problem with it. There were a fair few moments in the film with very odd character development that is the result of condensing this extremely complex and unfinished manga into just 2 hours. Like, the entire film takes place for like a week or so. Are you telling me Tetsuo went from petite to evil to fat in that short amount of time? And despite the lack of cohesion with certain elements in the story compared to the manga, there's still things that I just don't like about the film. Why do some characters look nearly identical to others? I'm a twin myself, and I don't even understand this shit. And why does a colonel have giant fucking brick shoulders, but have these little twink arms in certain scenes? Continuing, we have that really unnecessary scene where Kaori is assaulted by the clowns, and like, why? It doesn't really add anything at all to the plot, so why include it? And also, how does Kei seemingly fall for Kaneda over the course of like fucking 3 days? That's not how romance works. I don't know how it works to begin with, but still. I'm sure in the manga their relationship would have made more sense, but here it just feels like wasted potential or just a useless side plot. For the most part, every criticism of the movie is pretty fair, especially when you compare it to the favored manga, but even so, I'm not listening to someone with this as their male profile picture. There's still a big reason as to why this film is so iconic, and not just just the anime field, but everywhere. The film's production itself was doing so much unheard of and innovative stuff at the time, which can be credited to Japan's economic boom at the time, allowing companies to invest into anime and giving AKIRA a budget of 1.1 billion yen. That's a lot of money for a time. The film did shit like animating in 8, 12, and 24 frames per second, when the industry at that time was just doing 8 to 12, allowing AKIRA to look much smoother than most of the anime at the time. It was also the first Japanese animation to use pre-scoring, explaining why, at least in Japanese, the characters lip sync so well with their voices. It was doing more than most Disney films at the time, using many live action techniques to make it look more unique, as well as containing more than 160,000 frames altogether, more than double Hollywood animations at the time. This led to the film containing some incredible animation that is still great to this day. Whether that be the composition or the gore, it is a fantastic looking movie. AKIRA quickly became a cult classic for its more mature feel than most animations at the time, showcasing the world of anime to adults instead of infant children. Ooh, yucky. This led to a global box office of 45 million AUD, spiraling into creation of Manga Entertainment, a distribution label that sparked many of the first popular anime in the West. But none of this would matter if the movie was bad, which it's just not. I really liked this film despite all the issues I had with it. I can really feel the effort that was put into it. Even Otomo himself personally storyboarded the entire movie. AKIRA is by far the most terrifying, existentially dreadful, and disturbing anime I have ever seen. Its use of body horror was the first instance of an anime generally making me look away in fear. I also really liked all the characters in the film, each prominent character having their own personalities, displaying both their good sides and their sinful sides, leaving us ambiguous to who the real villain is. And the answer to that is no one, really. Everyone does fucked up shit in their own way, but equally make up for it with their other actions. And I love that about the film. There's no right or wrong, and the story doesn't tell you who's the villain, instead choosing to portray human emotions and morality in a brilliant way. On top of that, the soundtrack and the Japanese voice acting are both great, complementing the story brilliantly. My opinions of the movie are that it's a well-crafted film that, although it has many imperfections, makes up for it with all of its other amazing qualities. To summarize this video, AKIRA is great, but definitely not perfect. My final score for AKIRA is a 9 out of 10. Fuck you, it's my opinion. And it's the right one. Thanks for watching the video, especially if you made it this far. Lord knows how you've done it. I would have tapped out long ago. If you want to see me cover an anime you think is unique or whatever, leave a comment below or follow my Twitter. I actually might use it more one day. And also, special thanks to V6 for helping out with the video. I'll have a link to their individual channels in the description below. Thanks again, it really does mean a lot, and I'll see all of you in the next video. Cheers.